entering into a new time. A time when the very systems of control and commerce that we had believed to be the status quo were somehow no longer relevant.
You are listening
What
to
if we
Urban
were faced with a
Alchemy
new medium,
360
a new network, a new system that connected the people and places of the world in a new way?
Urban Alchemy 360.
What if that system is here?
Dismissed from drama school with a note that read, "Wasting her time. She's too shy to put her best foot forward." Turned down by the Decca recording company who said, "We don't like their sound and guitar music is on the way out." A failed soldier, farmer, and real estate agent. At 38 years old, he went to work for his father as a handyman. Cut from the high school basketball team, he went home, locked himself in his room, and cried. A teacher told him he was too stupid to learn anything, and he should go into a field where he might succeed by virtue of his pleasant personality. Fired from a newspaper because he lacked imagination and had no original ideas. His fiancée died, he failed in business twice, he had a nervous breakdown, and he was defeated in 8 elections. If you've never failed, you've never lived.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Got School. My name's Adria Fox, the It Girl, and you are listening and watching a forum created for parents like you and me and caregivers who are taking care of their students during distance learning. Look, I get it. We've got school. And for the first time in history, I believe we have a chance to reform school and recreate a way forward that creates innovative students and critical thinkers for the future. I want to bring on our co-host, Steph Gross. What's up, Steph?
What's up, Adria? Good morning. Great afternoon, actually. It's been a long day, and so a lot of knowledge bombs coming out of the sky. So it's hard to know what time it is, but right now it's got school time.
Yes, it's got school time and knowledge bombs. Are you ready for some knowledge bombs today? I'm super excited about our guest.
I'm super excited about our guest as well, simply because our guest from last week dropped so many knowledge bombs that these bombs are more than welcomed.
Exactly. So let's start off, though, Steph, with what we learned from last week in school.
Wow. Last week was really instrumental in terms of providing content and knowledge from Robin Lockhart. He just opened up my entire world to education, to a new vision of education.
Yeah, I agree. I think the essential thing that I keep seeing is caring and community. When kids and community members know that you care, the world opens up, and we kind of stop thinking. We get rid of some of the old thinking, right? So one of my key takeaways from last week was when Robin was sharing about how he talks to the youth, because they're coming to him for this emotional literacy training. A lot of them have been through a lot of trials and tribulations, and in the process, they think they're coming and he's going to fix them. And he's like, no, it's already in you.
Right.
So that's such an incredible takeaway, because I think sometimes we're waiting, when I grow up. No, it's already in you. So I just want to say that was my main takeaway from last week was it's already in you. Remember who you are in this world. You are already purposed to be that person, and it's already inside of you. So the goal of an educator or a guide is to just help you get that what's already inside of you out.
Exactly, and that was one of the takeaways that I had as well, is kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Like that statement that Robin made defined the parent and teacher and student engagement relationship. Because as long as our children and our student, at the same time, know how much we care about them and how much we are protecting them, but at the same time, allowing them to be their own creatives and allowing them to fail, but being there to be supportive, to really back them up and reinforce, like, here's why you failed and here's how we can do it better in the future. That's really what students and children need to know right now.
Absolutely. And then the takeaway of knowing what education really means, right?
Right.
This connection between what's already in you, bringing out that knowledge. And so I'm super excited to continue this path. I can't imagine how it just keeps getting better and better. Each person just kind of layers on top of each other. And so today's guest, go ahead and introduce our today's guest. I'm super excited for this.
Likewise, today, and again, I oftentimes get a little flustered because I do the background research on our guests, and today we have Tony Wagner, and Tony really brings a different dimension to education, and he started so many years ago. He's globally recognized education expert. He was a senior research fellow at the Learning Policy Institute, which was founded in 2015 by Dr. Linda Darling Hammond. He's a 20+ year Harvard University educator, including 4 years as the resident expert at Harvard's Innovation Lab. Additionally, he's the founder and co-director of the Change Leadership Group at Harvard University. And in his spare time, he's also an author. And we'll be talking a lot about that today, his most recent book.
Exciting. So let's bring him on. Tony Wagner, everyone.
Tony, welcome.
Tony, welcome.
Great
welcome.
to be with you. Great to see you both. After having corresponded with you, great to see you in person.
Yes, thank you for the correspondence and so direct. So Tony, thanks for being here, like I said. And, we've had a number of guests so far on the show, and one common thread is this reimagining education. And you fit right into our community, by the way, and through your commitment to being this educational transformer, I'm calling you. Like you're this transformer that's helping people understand that the old system is dead, and we need to start to reimagine and help and let our kids do that with us. And so I'm a little biased because both of my children go to High Tech High, which is one of the films that you were the technical advisor on for education. So most likely to succeed. So I'm going to wait till later to talk a little more about that. But let's get into your book, Learning by Heart, your new book. Pretty excited about this book. So we have a few questions for you. I'll let Steph start off.
So, Tony, really understanding, and again, I have some bias too because I'm a big TEDx fan, and I know that you've done a number of them, but what common denominators do you believe exist between your previous books that actually flow all the way through up into Learning with Heart?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the challenge we have, I think, is to fundamentally understand how the world has changed since we created our education system at the dawn of the industrial era. A lot of people think we're still in a knowledge economy. That's not true anymore either. Knowledge has been commoditized, growing exponentially, changing constantly. And so we live in the innovation era. And the arguments I make across my 6 previous books are the need for us to help our communities understand what are the skills and dispositions that will enable our kids to thrive, not just succeed, but thrive. And what must we do differently to reimagine education to better prepare all young people for work, for learning, and for citizenship in the 21st century. Now, what's different about this new book, Learning by Heart, is that I I kind of felt I'd made all of these arguments, and I had no new arguments to make, no new points to sort of, bring home. But
being an innovator, and what does actually being an innovator mean, and describing critical thinking and putting all of those two things together and just merging those together. Can you just develop that a little bit more?
Yeah,
and then
sure.
I'll ask you the next question.
Yeah, let me back up one half step, because sometimes people think all I care about are skills and dispositions. Let's be clear, academic content knowledge still matters, right? We need to know where we've come from. We need to know our history, our culture, our background. We need to know scientific knowledge. So knowledge matters, but in the 21st century, skills matter more, because knowledge has become a commodity. It's on every internet-connected device. And fundamentally, motivation matters most. So what does it mean to be an innovator? The disposition of an innovator, first of all, staying curious. All the innovators whom I've interviewed, both young people and people who are very accomplished, have one thing in common: they're extremely curious. But beyond that, let's be clear, there's two different kinds of innovation. One is bringing new possibilities to life. Think of Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg. I don't believe you can educate for that kind of innovation. In fact, all of those three people were college dropouts, right?
Right.
So to the point. But there's another kind of innovation which is equally important and to which every young child can aspire. And that's to be a creative problem solver, whether it's in health or in education or the environment or in high tech, it doesn't matter. The real coin of realm today is the capacity to solve problems creatively. Now, where does that begin? Go back to your critical thinking question. That begins with the ability to ask really good questions. So it's actually problem identification that business leaders and military leaders whom I've interviewed told me was, even before creative problem solving, is problem identification, identifying the right problem. Einstein said it the best. He said, the formulation of the problem is often more essential than the solution. So the ability to ask really good questions goes right with curiosity. And I think that those two interlocking dispositions are absolutely critical for work, learning, and citizenship in the 21st century.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Do you think that your lived experience helped frame that mindset?
Oh, gosh.
I mean, you obviously know that.
Well, I was always curious, and I was bored in school. And so, in a sense, I had to find other avenues for my curiosity and other ways to learn. So that was certainly lived experience. The other was, adults kind of writing me off because I kept asking questions. And school wasn't supposed to be about asking questions. It was supposed to be about getting the right answers. I didn't care about the right answers. I didn't do my homework. I cared about, big, interesting, important questions, like why is there racism, or why was there an arms race? Things that, I had a coming of age experience in the 60s. And back then, the threat of nuclear holocaust was our COVID, right? And our climate change. And the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King was our George Floyd moment. And so these were the questions that drove me, and they had absolutely nothing to do with school. School wouldn't help me with any of those. So I guess I stayed curious, and that made me a very innovative teacher. And about half of the book, Learning by Heart, are about my first 10 years of teaching and trying to be the kind of teacher I wished I'd had. A teacher who valued questions and curiosity, who respected kids, who bring different perspectives, who would help kids kind of begin to see the larger world around them.
So in the book, you talk about your camp experience. And I thought that was so incredible, the experience that you had the year that you went to camp, where you were learning Native American traditions. I thought that was so fabulous. And that really did that moment in my mind when I was reading it, that must have shaped how you thought and moved forward for the rest of your days. It was really an incredible experience.
Yeah. Well, I grew up comparatively very fortunate, right? I grew up in a very kind of isolated, upper middle white enclave outside of Baltimore, and I became sort of vaguely aware of racism. But before that happened, I had this extraordinary summer working with a Native American artist who taught a few of us. There were only 4 of us, one of whom was his son, who signed up for this activity. But we made our own costumes. We practiced various Indian, Native American dances all summer long. And then at the very end of the summer, I was kind of a chubby, clumsy kid, terrified of getting up in front of the entire camp and performing these Native American dances. But I was proud of the costume I'd made. I was proud of what I'd learned. And what it really instilled in me, that experience, was a lifelong fascination with very diverse cultures and a respect for very different kinds of people and cultures around the world. And I've since obviously traveled very widely and deeply enjoyed trying to understand different cultures and people.
Tony, I'm gonna partner you with another great, and because you're an education great. But Phil Jackson talked about the exact same thing through the Native American culture and the Native American experience. And I find it interesting that you can parallel that and actually echoed a lot of what he said. So you're right up there on the Mount Rushmore greatness and Native American support. So
You're
speak
kind.
to it. So let's talk about the innovation economy. Let's just go back to that real quick. In preparing students for the innovation economy, what do we need to change in our current curriculum to really stimulate that in our current curriculum, or is it the way we teach?
I think it's both. I think our curriculum is far too much about memorization and content knowledge acquisition, and not enough about skills and dispositions. So all 3 are important, as I've said, but we rely almost extensively on really trying to get kids to memorize a bunch of stuff that they don't have to memorize. I'll give an example. All right, you took chemistry in high school, both of you, right?
Yes.
And you studied the periodic table, right? So you can
Hydrogen.
certainly tell me, since you memorized them, how many elements there are in the periodic table, right? Simple question. No? Well, whatever
8.
number you come up with is wrong, because 3 more were added last month, right? And let's have a contest. Let's see whether or not you can recite the 50 state capitals while I Google them. Let's see which is quicker. So you get my point. Too much of our curriculum is content knowledge acquisition. There's not enough emphasis on skills. Kids don't write enough. They don't speak enough. They don't do their own research. They don't do their own projects. So they're not learning persistence, tenacity, those dispositions that are totally critical. And they're not really encouraged to stay curious and to follow up and have an opportunity to research their own questions or things that are of deep concern to them. So I think that fundamentally the curriculum is out of balance badly. And the forms of teaching do not continue to develop the intrinsic motivation that, in fact, is the single most important outcome of much of our education.
Tony, you said
Incredible. So Tony, I want to know, educating for social good. You talk about that, and so I'm a social business entrepreneur. I believe that everything that I do has to be connected to a social good. And so, can you talk about that? Like, what does that mean from your perspective?
Well, first and foremost, we're not talking enough about educating for citizenship. We talk about giving kids workplace skills. I think that's incredibly important. But the skills you need for active and informed citizenship in a democracy are exactly the same skills you need for work in the 21st century and also for life learning. What are they? Simply the ability to think critically. We've just been talking about, to ask good questions, to really critically examine sources and perspectives and evidence, to weigh evidence. Secondly, the ability to work collaboratively. All work is done collaboratively except in school, right? And thirdly, the ability to communicate effectively, both orally and in writing. And finally, the ability to solve problems creatively. To me, all of those are essential elements of work in the 21st century in the innovation economy, but also citizenship. And so I think it's critically important that we give kids the content knowledge as well as the skills for active and informed citizenship. And so that last piece, you know, I've just talked about those 4 C's for skills, I would add a fifth, and that's compassion, empathy, the capacity to not just respect, but to understand and empathize with people who are very different than ourselves. That's what I learned from that Cherokee Native American with whom I studied. The ability to deeply appreciate someone who was fundamentally different than myself.
Right. Do you think that takes a? I'm sorry. Do you think that takes a kind of this partnership where you are with that person and you seek to learn that? Because I don't think you can learn that in a book. So I have a different lived experience than a lot of my friends. And so I think it takes spending time, because, you know, you write these policies, especially around education, and you kind of just dump everybody in together. Right. So what do you think about, like, how much time does that take to know that I'm more like you than I'm not like you?
Right.
You know, I think it's both. I mean, I'm a proponent, and I know High Tech High does this, gets students out in work-based internships, gets them out into the community to solve problems as a part of their senior year. So those are lived experiences. But I'm a recovering high school English teacher, so I have to put in a plug for literature. I have to tell you, you know, the summer after I graduated from high school, I read The Grapes of Wrath, and I was reading it for myself. And there was no teacher there to tell me, you know, what are the elements of style and blah, blah, blah. There was no intellectual overlay. I just experienced the Joad family. I experienced the Great Depression in a way that no history book could ever enable me to do. So I actually believe in both. We can't always go everywhere to different cultures and to appreciate and learn from widely different kinds of people, but we can do it through books. And so to me, what that requires is a different approach to teaching literature, less cerebral. Some of that's important, but it also has to be, well, how did this book make you feel? What did you learn from this character's struggle that applies to your own life? Questions of that sort that we don't often ask in our literature classes.
Tony, that's interesting. Back to what you were saying a second ago, I'd also add gratitude to that. But now that you're talking about the literacy, we're talking about the book side of it. This book is really different from your previous books, and you took a different approach. And it seems like this is more of a memoir style that allowed you to really explore those lived experiences that you just talked about through the characters and the example that those characters have set and the things that they went through. What prompted that change?
Well, it was two things. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, I really felt after 6 books, I didn't have any new thoughts to offer or arguments to make. And so I wanted to try something different. And secondly, it goes back to literature and my love of literature, which happened for me at a very early age. I had this aspiration when I was a teenager to want to be a novelist. I started a novel when I was 19 years old, and I guess that was my second or third college. I lost track, but I was, writing a novel, and then I wrote 3 drafts of a novel in my first year of my doctoral program at Harvard because I found the Harvard program so damn boring. I wanted to get back to, having fun with fiction. So I finally decided I'm probably not a good novelist or a fiction writer, but I still felt I had stories to tell about learning, about education, as you said, about my own lived experience. And so I thought, well, why not try to combine those two things? Telling stories about education and learning while trying to hone my skills of writing in a different kind of genre. Storytelling, fiction, not fiction in this sense, but being able to write good dialogue, develop good characters who were real characters. Those are some of the things that challenged me as a writer.
Did you have to get a teacher to teach you how to do that? an educator
did.
to teach you how to do that?
I absolutely did. The story is, and this is about failure too, right? I drafted a proposal for this book, this memoir, 3 or 4 years ago. 4 years ago it was. And it was a requirement that I submitted to my previous publisher, which was then Simon & Schuster, Scribner. They had right of first refusal. And they came back and said, well, this is kind of an interesting book, but you really don't know how to write memoirs. So I had a literary agent, wonderful guy, Esmond Harmsworth. He said, let me help you. Maybe I can find you someone who can be a coach. And so it took him 8 months. But he found a woman by the name of Robin Dennis, who lives in London, and she was my writing coach for nearly 2 years. We Skyped every day. I'm sorry, no, it wasn't every day. It was every week. She'd read drafts, and she didn't write a word. She was not a ghostwriter, didn't write a single word. But she really, it was the equivalent of getting a master's in fine arts, learning from her. How does a work of fiction and a memoir compare? There's a narrative arc with both. There has to be a sympathetic character with both who goes through a set of experiences and hopefully learns something that the reader will value and benefit from. Well, those were my challenges as a memorist. And it was wonderful having a coach to help me through that work.
Wow. What a great coach she was, because I got that. I got this character who hated school, who was just like, I think they even called you an F-up in high school.
They did.
And so those characters are marvelous. And I really appreciate it. I think it was one of your English teachers, right? And you asked him, will you teach me how to be a creative writer? Yeah. Amazing. Is that what made you end up being an English teacher, or what? How did that happen?
Well, it was the best of times and the worst of times with respect to English teachers. It was right out of Tale of Two Cities. In the fall of my senior year, I was at a very second-rate boarding school, and long story short, come back late on a Saturday night, 20 minutes late, right? We were allowed to go out to town, and my nemesis, Sidney Clark, whom we all called the Mole, because he went around like this, kind of looking for trouble with his huge flashlight. And he caught me in the beam of his flashlight, coming in 20 minutes late. And as you said, he said, "Wagner, you're a screw-up. You've always been a screw-up. You're always gonna be a screw-up, Wagner. Now get to your dorm." He didn't use the word screw-up, as you pointed out. He used the F word. I was devastated. I was just crushed as a human being.
Wow.
And I felt like a life sentence had just been pronounced on me that I would never outlive. So I left school the next day, just left, and got myself into a fourth-rate, last chance boarding school for kids who were F-ups, right? And, it was about that time I read a book a week. Sometimes they weren't assigned, or I would make sure always to read them before they were assigned. But so the teacher wouldn't ruin them for me. But at that point, I decided I want to write. I want to learn to write fiction. So I approached someone in the school who was not my English teacher. He taught English to other classes. But I said, "Would you teach me to write fiction?" And he said, "I'd be delighted." That was his word. He was an Englishman, very polite. So we met weekly, and he would give me a writing assignment, a genre assignment. He'd say, one week he'd say, "Well, write a childhood reminiscence," or "How about write me a dialogue or a monologue, or maybe an editorial?" And so every week I'd meet with him, and he'd point to one or two things that he thought maybe I did well, and maybe one thing that I could work on for next time. And that not only inspired me to want to become an English teacher, but I used the same method of teaching when I worked with my students, first with working in a public school with at-risk kids, all of whom were, highly likely to leave school at any moment, in this really small alternative school within a school, and then working literally at the other end of the tracks at an elite private school, Sidwell Friends in Washington, D.C., where Obama's children went. But in both cases, the same methodology worked, really engaging each individual child and trying to understand what it was they wanted to write about, and then using the conferencing method to teach writing, as well as writer's workshop, where kids would read their works aloud to one another.
Well, before we transition and talk about the film, Adria and I'd like to give you some extra credit. So what?
I need all I can get, believe me.
What 3 books would you recommend that a high schooler read that aren't required reading to really set a foundation for their lives?
You know, you emailed me that question a couple of hours ago, and I really appreciate your doing that, because I've been going through this litany of and list of books ever since you sent them to me, and I can't choose 3 books. You know,
Okay.
There's too many great. You know, you got to read the classics. You got to read the Greeks, right? You have to read Shakespeare. But I would suggest 3 authors, not in all of their books, whom the typical high school student is probably not going to encounter in their classes. The first is the poet Rabindranath Tagore. He got the Nobel Prize in 1919. He's an Indian poet. He was also an educator. He started a school under a group of trees outside for peasants from India. His poems are like prayers, and they just speak to me in the profoundest way and give me also something of an insight into a Hindu culture very different from my own. The second author is Toni Morrison. Again, a Nobel Prize winner, author, as you know, of Beloved and many other important books, whom I think offers a profound insight into the African-American experience and the slave experience in this country. Yes. And then the third is Erich Fromm, a psychoanalyst. He really kind of distills 2,000 years of the humanist tradition in his works, which are part psychology, part philosophy. He distills the work of the best, I think, of both Marx and Freud, the humanist sides of those authors, as well as others. There's a very, very simple book any high school kid could start with. I did when I was 18. It transformed my life. It was called The Art of Loving. The idea that that loving is a discipline. It's not just something you fall in, but it's something you work at. And then I went on from that book to read some of his more sort of comprehensive books. The Sane Society still stands as probably the best critique of modern American capitalism that has ever been published. So those are 3 authors I would recommend.
Awesome.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. So we're going to talk about Finland, the Finland phenomenon. Yes. And such an amazing place. I'd heard this. My mother's an educator, and she introduced me. She said, well, in Finland, they're doing it right. Because I asked her one day, where are they doing education right? And she's like, well, Finland. And so we're going to introduce that to the audience now. Thank you for that moment. So Finland, what are they doing right in Finland, and what inspired the inspiration for this film, Tony?
Wow. What are they doing right? There's a list of so many things. But what I wanted to try to understand, really in response to the question you asked your mother, was there any country in the world that was doing it right? I knew how to transform classrooms because I had transformed my own as a teacher. I also had seen great schools like High Tech High or other schools that were started back in the 80s by colleagues of Ted Sizer's. But what about a country, I thought? And then I began reading about Finland. Pasi Sahlberg's book, The Finland Phenomenon, Finnish Lessons, is a great book that people can read now. And he's got his third version coming out, Finnish Lessons 3.0. He continues to update it. So for folks who want to do that, you can watch the documentary, but read the book. But I had to go. So I went to Finland. In fact, I was invited there actually by their members of their parliament to speak. And so I took the opportunity, and fortunately, my friend and colleague Bob Compton said, okay, if you're going to Finland, let's make a movie. So, oh boy, what a great opportunity. So I spent quite a bit of time there visiting schools, interviewing teachers and kids. And one of the things that I learned first was that Finland 45 years ago was a struggling agrarian economy with a stunningly mediocre school system. So it was a national crisis. And you really can't get that kind of systematic change unless you see that there's a crisis. And one of the problems we have in this country is we think it's only poor kids' schools that are bad, that need fixing, not everybody else's. So we don't have that kind of a crisis. But Finland did. So what did they do? They formed a national consensus, bipartisan, about the need to fundamentally upgrade and transform their education system. Where did they start? Not with high stakes testing the way we did, not with blaming teachers the way we did. They started with transforming the preparation of teachers. Beginning in the 1970s, every teacher had to have a real master's degree and had to do real research as an educator and had to have a 1-year internship with a mentor, master teacher. So that's what I learned first and foremost is the importance of teacher preparation. And I know you're a fan of High Tech High, and that's of course what High Tech High now does, is they've started their own graduate school of education, looking in many ways like what Finnish teacher education looks like.
So that leads us to your next film in documentary. And what I know about documentaries is when they're made well, they inspire an entire community to grow and change. Whether it's a cause like education or any other cause in the world, it ignites them. So let's watch this next. Exactly, right, Steph? So let's watch this next clip of your next movie.
We divide the day up in high schools into bits of time, into 40 or 50-minute blocks typically, and then we ring bells and people start to shuffle around the building and do something else. That's an organizational device. It's not an educational principle.
10 university heads in 1890 said, in 11th grade, everyone should learn chemistry. In senior year, everyone should learn physics. A lot of these subjects are great, but these priorities were dictated 124 years ago.
The old blue-collar industrial model of education is already gone. We're already living in its wake.
What happens to society when hundreds of millions of people have that aimless, rudderless feeling of, I've been replaced by a very small box? I don't know if there's a solution.
We all learn in different ways. This isn't the way to do it. This is the way that I did it.
If the assignment is you get it back and you crumple it up and throw it in the trash can, that's kind of one student experience. And if the assignment is to produce something that you're going to present to professionals in the field, that's completely changing the whole dynamic.
We are trying to have that type of perplexity and curiosity get inculcated in our students.
Saying your parents, all your friends' parents, and a bunch of people you don't know are gonna be here to see the work you did. It creates an aspect of authenticity, because we are creating something for an audience.
The things I think in life that give us some of the greatest satisfaction is making something that wasn't there before.
And I can't wait for that moment when it does work and I'm completely done with it. And it's like all leaves. It'll be one of the greatest moments of my life.
When kids have that feeling, it's transformative for them. I made this, and everyone's coming to look at it.
Well, most likely to succeed.
Wow.
I want to say that they should require all incoming parents to watch the movie.
In every school.
In every school. Well, I'm saying especially at high tech. But the reason why I say that is because this year the distance learning is all new, and so my daughter's in high tech for the first time. And I think if I had watched that film prior to, in fact, when I was doing my research, I found you on a thread. It was literally very, very natural, organic. It was just, I was just digging, and then I found your name and I Googled you. But until I started learning more about you, I didn't know that you had created that film. So I made my kids watch it the other day. And again, thank you for that. What was the impact that film has made on the people that filmed it and anyone from the high tech community?
Yeah. Well, just a little bit of history, first of all, and to give credit where credit is due. Ted Dintersmith, a former investor, now retired, father of 2 kids, contacted me a number of years ago and said, loved your book, The Global Achievement Gap, want to work together. What can we do? How about let's make a film, he said. And, he didn't know anything about filmmaking, and I didn't. I mean, I've always enjoyed it. But at any rate, this became sort of Ted and Tony's excellent journey. And we worked together for several years. I mean, first he found an amazing film crew, and then we were kind of looking at lots of different places and doing a lot of different interviews. And I had known of High Tech High. I first knew of and visited High Tech High shortly after it started, because it was something, it was a part of Ted Sizer's coalition of essential schools. Actually, Larry Rosenstock was at that point a part of that network. And I had actually brought the Gates Foundation folks down to see High Tech High, and they gave it a grant, and that's what enabled it to grow into now many, many schools and graduate school of education. So at some point, I convinced the whole film crew and Ted to go visit High Tech High. And they did, and they were just blown away. But then it took, a long time to create a storyline, to shoot the film, and the result was an attempt to make a film that would help people understand why we need to change. I was mentioning earlier that we don't have a crisis in American education, except for folks who look at poor kids' schools in poverty. And that is a crisis, no question. But every middle-class kids' schools, everybody thinks are basically fine, except for those terrible teachers' unions. That's what they say. So they had nothing to really show what school could be. And so the film we tried to make was a film that, first of all, helped people understand the beginning of the innovation era and how skills were going to become far more important than content knowledge. But also, what does a school look like that really puts student motivation and the development of skills and dispositions first? And that's what, of course, what High Tech High does. And secondly, ennobles the teaching profession and credits teachers for being able to sort of produce incredibly creative curricula, which is exactly what High Tech High teachers do. And so those were the intents of making of the film. And now since then, Ted brilliantly did not sell the film to Netflix for a paltry sum of money, which he could have. Instead, he said, we're going to make it available to every single community who wants to show it for a very, very nominal fee. And then later we're going to stream it, which it is now, of course, on all of the major streaming services. But the idea was to use it as a tool to provoke conversation. And now it's been shown in, I don't know, 10,000 communities at least, all over the world. I think there's a Spanish version and other versions, maybe a Chinese version as well. And so it has really, I think, helped people to see what school really could and should be for their kids.
So you talk a lot about the innovation age. And this is kind of what high tech model does. It helps kids understand that they can innovate on an idea and make it their own. And they have all these makers is a part of the curriculum. It's really interesting. And a lot of parents were freaked out, and the movie talks about that. Like, well, you know, when's the learning happening? You know, or some of the questions, right? So what are those 7 survival skills for careers, college, and citizenship?
Yeah, I call them the 7 survival skills. But the story of how I came to these, I think, might interest your viewers, because they didn't just pop into my head whole cloth. It was a process of learning for me. The first thing that happened is I read Thomas Friedman's book in 2005, The World is Flat. And I began to think, wow, I'm missing something. The world is really changing here. And then a short time later, I happened to have gotten upgraded to a first class on a flight somewhere. And I sat next to this guy who turned out to be the CEO of a company that made the machines that made computer chips. And having just read Friedman's book about the world is being flat and all, I was kind of curious. I said, so Clay, his name was Clay Parker, tell me, what do you look for when you interview somebody to hire? And he said, well, the first thing I look for is the ability to ask really good questions. And I was kind of shocked right away, because he'd already told me he was an engineer. I thought, well, you know, he'd say, well, it's calculus or engineering or something. He said, no, good questions. I said, why? He said, because fundamentally we're about problem solving, and being able to solve problems requires you to ask the right questions. Then I said, well, okay, what about the second thing? And I thought, now we're going to get chemistry, calculus or something. He said, it's the ability to engage people in a thoughtful conversation. And I just was shocked, because I thought it would be something totally different. So that led me on a journey. I was trying to understand, was Clay Parker just a one-off, kind of unusual kind of engineering guy, or is there something really going on here? So I spent 2 years interviewing a wide variety of senior executives, college professors, people who were leaders in politics and so on, and senior members of the military. And over, I asked them, what were the skills that matter most, and what are the gaps? And out of that, I distilled what I called the 7 survival skills. Number 1, critical thinking and problem solving. Fundamentally, all work today is about trying to solve problems, and you have to learn to think critically, to ask good questions, as Clay Parker said. Secondly, collaboration across networks and leading by influence. Increasingly, all work today is done collaboratively, except at school, of course. And so you've got to learn to collaborate. Thirdly, agility and adaptability. You know, the world doesn't simply want you to follow orders anymore in the workplace. You really have to be agile and adaptable and willing to try new things, take on whole new jobs. Fourth, initiative and entrepreneurship. Being able to propose new business possibilities, to take the initiative on your own without being told what to do, are incredibly important. Number 5 is effective oral and written communication. You know, that's still how we communicate our ideas and how we learn, is through oral and written communication. Incredibly important. 6, accessing and analyzing information. We all know information is out there, you know, but we have to know how to do a good internet search. And then we have to know how to analyze and evaluate the information we're getting back. And then finally, curiosity and imagination. Without those sparks, we really can't create anything new, a new idea, a new work of art, a new solution to a problem. So those were the 7 survival skills, and they really, surprisingly to me, stood the test of time. Over and over again, as I've traveled around the world to give speeches, executives have come up and said to me, you nailed it. You got those skills exactly right. Even most recently, the World Economic Forum wrote an article on the 7 survival skills now 15 years later.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. We often talk about technology giants who are shaping our society and our culture, but it's innovators like yourself, who've taken education, transformed it into edutainment, because there's a lot of edutainment that happens right now, and then just really taking that and looking at how that can help bridge the digital divide that we have now, and then coupling that on top of the 7 points that you just shared with us, we could really build out a student that is so well-rounded that they can be a leader like that within seconds. So thank you for everything you've done.
Well, thank you both for this amazing conversation and for inviting me to sort of share some of these things with your audience, with your parents and others. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Absolutely. We did have one more. We do want to talk about some final thoughts here. Your final thoughts, where can people find you? Anything you want to say about your book? It's your turn.
Well, first of all, I have a website, TonyWagner.com, where you can learn about all 7 of the books that I've written. I have a Twitter handle, @DrTonyWagner, and I don't kind of tweet out what I had for breakfast. I try to tweet out interesting articles, research, things that I think will be of interest to anyone concerned with education. Learning by heart is on every medium. One thing that you might not know is that I actually narrate the audiobook version. And I had great fun doing it. I didn't narrate any of my other books for audiobook, but I did do this one because I wanted to tell my own story. So thanks again for this wonderful opportunity for a fabulous conversation.
So what I've been up to is, as I mentioned last week, I spent some time out at some school districts here in Southern California, as well as our very own County Board of Education to really become a voice for the community and, just really addressing some of those gaps and opportunities. But more importantly, we here at Legacy Parenting Survivalware, where we really connect, where it's about the imprint, and we connect in early child development to really help stimulate those learning pathways and that cognitive learning between the child and the newborn child and parent. We've actually collaborated with momstheword.com, and Moms the Word is a platform designed for moms to really support them as well. So we've gotten out, we've helped them pivot and opening them up to a couple new markets. In addition to that, because we're focused on education, PQE, which is Parents for Quality Education, are hosting a summit on the 29th, and there's more information that can be found on Facebook about that. And you can visit my page, or you can follow us in some links to have that happen. So that's what I've been up to. And again, as always, I'm humbled to be here, happy to co-host with you, and love everything about what we're doing here. And just to kind of wrap it all up into a nice little bow, etap.org/adaptive learning. We've consolidated a lot of open source information, including Khan, and we're gonna, I'm gonna leverage that as a partner of the company to bring in Tony Wagner's seven steps there, because I think that's a very important piece. And recently, as of last week, there was a report that a number of school districts had been cyber attacked, and they've been held hostage. And I just want to talk about classroomat.com, which is a closed loop secure system. It allows teachers to push and pull content, and really removes the burden from students to have to download and print and do all of that. So it's very technologically sound and innovative. So just want to share those things, but that's what I've been up to. So thank you. How about you?
Well, as you know, I wear many hats, and one of them is my social business, the Communities for Global Sustainability. We are going to be building in Paradise, California. Many people might not know, but Paradise, California suffered a major fire, and pretty much the whole town burned down. And so a lot of citizens are eager to get back to Paradise. And so through our modular building, we can build homes in 4 weeks or less. And so we're pretty excited about that opportunity to get people back in their homes and living in Paradise, California. And as well, here on the Urban Alchemy UA360 network, we're going to be producing more shows. So look forward to more content. And if you too are a content provider and you're interested in learning how you can create your own show, or maybe you already have your own show, we're looking for content creators who have the mind, body, and soul down. Like, this is who you are. So if you have something for the mind, something for the soul, or something for the body, we're here to help you navigate the world of being a content creator.
Outstanding, Adria. Always doing phenomenal work.
So thank you for tuning in to Got School. This has been another incredible moment with educational expert Tony Wagner. We thank you for being here. We'll see you next time at same bat time, same bat channel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great pleasure to be with you both. Thank you so much.